Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I just played Rolling Heights from John D. Clair and AEG. And I have to admit something. I had the chance to play this game, I think 2 years ago at Gen Con. It was out on a table, and I'd suffered from like game overload that day. You know, like if you're at Gen Con and you're like, one more demo of a game, and I just didn't have it in me. But I regret that because I didn't realize how much fun this game was. I had a lot of fun playing this today. It is I would say, light to medium game.
Yeah, definitely light to medium. Definitely an accessible game with some Euro-y elements, but definitely on the lighter side of that.
Yeah, so here we have it set up. This is an end game state, and if you can tell by all the little purple colors all over the place, Ryan destroyed me. I don't know, destroyed, but I was like 150 to 170 or something, or something like. Or
you were like 130 to 170.
Yeah, he beat me by about around 50 points. But you're doing a lot of cool things in this game, and it's built around this sort of like, it's not a bag builder, but you are collecting a bunch of meeples throughout the game. Everyone starts with 2 gray meeples and 2 brown meeples that represent workers, I think carpenters.
And construction workers.
Construction workers that will collect you concrete and wood, so you can start building some of these building tiles, because you're going to be building these building tiles out on this map. Everyone's going to start with the tile out there, and then, as you can see, you build on those building tiles with other types of materials, including, I think, glass and steel, that concrete and wood. And then as you complete your tiles, you're able to sort of take the points, take potentially new meeples, and there's a whole slew of other colors of meeples that do even additional things, not just collecting your resources. So it becomes a very satisfying thing.
Well, let me talk about what I like about this game.
Yeah.
This is my personal opinion, because I actually really did enjoy this. And you know what? I think that John D. Clair's kind of on a roll.
When hasn't he been on a roll?
Well, there's some game, like, I'm not the biggest space-based fan, and there's some games, it is what it is. But like, this has a huge element of fun. Exactly like what David said, where you start off with those 4 small meeples, and like, look at this. By the end of the game, like, you're getting up to like 10 meeples that you can roll, and you might even have a pool that's bigger than 10. So when we talk about engine building, that idea of like, okay, well, you have 4 meeples, the first turn, you're rolling them, which we'll talk about is a really unique mechanic, and you're using them to get resources, and you're getting a few, and you're building some small level 1 buildings, and whatever. You're building these tiny little buildings, and you can kind of see even on the map, as we build out, our buildings get bigger and bigger, because we start to get more and more meeples at our hands. We're rolling them, and that pattern, that cycle of like rolling, getting more and more and more resources every round as your pool gets bigger, it's so satisfying.
Yeah, this game builds significantly, because as Ryan was talking there, I was just recalling at the beginning of the game, I'll just show you. Everyone, by the way, has these cool little boxes.
Yeah.
If 1 to 4 players, you're each going to get your own little construction site. And you take those meeples, you roll them in your box, and here's what you do. So the meeples can land in one of 3 states. They can be on their back, which means they're exhausted workers. They're not going to do you any good. They can be sort of on their, not feet, but on their heads or on their arms, or kind of tilted. That's kind of a standard worker. He's going to give you sort of 1 unit of work. But then you can have people that are on their feet, and those are going to give you those are ready workers.
Yeah, a better action. They give you more resources than a worker that's on its side.
I forget the terms for those two types of workers.
Yeah, I forget the terms too.
You get the idea. The cool thing is you can just keep rolling them. If they're all on their backs, don't worry. You can just roll them again. You can keep rolling freely until you have more than half of your total meeples rolled that are either on their feet or on their sides, but not exhausted. At that point, you can continue rolling, but you do so at a risk. Because say you're up to where you've gotten 10 meeples, and you can never roll more than 10 meeples, and you roll them all, and it's really fun. Like, you're literally just dumping a bunch in there, and then you pick them out, the ones that work, and then you're like, okay, I've got more than half, but I really didn't get these gray ones that I needed. And you can risk it, and you roll it again. If you keep rolling that way, as long as at least 1 meeple is on its feet or on its side, you're safe, and you can take those,
keep going.
And you can keep going. But if ever you roll, and all the meeples you roll, this is kind of like Strike in a way.
A little bit.
If any of the meeples you roll, if all of them are on their backs, then you've busted kind of, and the workers go on strike, which means you don't get any of those workers, but all the meeples that you had gotten, you have to take half rounded down away from those. So you can really, push your luck to a bad place potentially.
I'll say that we had an interesting game with that because I'm not a push your luck person. Because I know that like if I'm looking at something really good and I've got like, okay, 3 or 4 landed on their back. Okay, I could push my luck and maybe get one of them. But if they all land flat and I lose half of my other 6, that's going to be a frustrating experience for me. So I don't tend to push my luck. I did it once when I had 4 guys and I managed to land 2 of them. So that was okay. Whereas David pushed his luck. I think you push your luck almost every roll.
I pushed my luck most cases. So once I got up to like 8 meeples and I rolled and I had more than half of them. So I was like 3 left. And I busted a couple times there. And when you bust that way, you're losing a fair amount of meeples. But I had one time where it was crazy. I kept going and I got one more. I got all the way up to where I had 9 meeples with like at least 3 risky rolls I took. I left the one. I didn't want to roll the one last meeple only to lose half of the ones that I had. But all those meeples are going to do a variety of different things. Like I said, once you have all your meeples and you've kind of set that, you use some to get some materials.
Yeah.
You can use some of those materials to buy tiles, and you can only buy one of those per turn, but you put that out on the board somewhere, and this represents property that you own that's under construction. It's going to be a place where you use those materials. Once you put all the materials that are required on there, you're able to put your little color piece on top of one of those buildings and then take the points and rewards. And again, a lot of those rewards are more in different meeples. And these meeples do a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
And we played, again, 2 very different games here. I took a lot of these yellow meeples because they just, if they're on their side, they give you 1 point. If they're on their feet, they give you 2. And I had 3 by the end of the game. So it was just a little points engine just from those guys. I didn't have to worry about building as much.
I went a different route.
You went a different route, and it's probably a smarter route.
You can kind of tell by looking at my buildings, all of these giant blue steel towers. I just decided I was going to get as many blue meeples to begin with. So before I talk about that, because this does kind of tie in, whenever we play a game, we like to talk about who it's for and who it's not for. And I think this is a good time to talk about who it's for because this is one of those ones that I think hit both of us at a certain spot.
Yeah.
For me, and I think for people like me that are mid-weight to light to mid gamers, this game is not super long. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but it gives you a lot to think about on your turn. And that's something I really like about what we were talking about with David. When I play a game like this, I like to look at the in-game goals, which there are 3 for every game. I like to look at my personal goals. I like to look at what's available, and I start to kind of plan out a strategy of like, I'm going to take a few small buildings to get a few blue workers, to get a few clear workers, so that I can later build some giant blue and glass, like steel and glass towers. And this game has a lot of that puzzle element where you can kind of look around. There's so many different buildings that are going to give you workers, and there's so many different ways you can fulfill all of these different in-game goals. I think it's really satisfying. You start to like find paths to get to where you want to go. And I built into a very specific type of pull where I was really just getting steel and glass. I think at one point David was like,
steel.
How are you getting so much steel? It's because I had 3 steel guys, and maybe I was getting 3 to possibly even 6 steel every time I rolled them if I got super lucky. And that ability to build to a specific strategy, I think for me was really satisfying because I like to be able to kind of, plan out a route to victory.
Yeah.
And hit as many of these check marks as I can. And the fact that there are always these 3 variable scoring conditions means you're always having something to consider as you're placing your tiles out.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think it's also for people, I'm not so focused on that. In fact, I told Ryan at the end of the game, and this is not an excuse, this is just how I play.
This is why I beat David by 50 points.
But these public scoring tiles out here, the advertisements and what they call them, I didn't even look at them until the end of the game. Like, it was time for end of game scoring. I'm like, what?
Oh, there's some points here.
I was like, what is it? Yes, I am that bad at winning games. But what I'll say is I had a ton of fun along the way doing all those things we described. Rolling the meeple, just the tactile experience of rolling your meeples and pushing your luck and doing those sorts of things. But then also there's a puzzle going on with these tiles out here because some of these tiles are just straight up points. When you complete them, they're 2 points plus you get a meeple. Some of the tiles, when you complete them, are X number of points for whatever type of building that might be adjacent to them. however many of these types of buildings are within 2 spaces of them. So it gave you some of those sort of tile placement game type vibes.
Not to mention that each space, a lot of the spaces give you bonus points if you put a particular type of building on them too.
Yeah, and not to mention, there's this board that is variable. There's these 6 tiles that are arranged randomly at the beginning of the game. So the way these land masses are going to be laid out is going to vary from game to game. But the gameplay itself, regardless of what score you're working towards, is very satisfying as well.
It's just fun using some of these meeples, and we didn't even talk about, like, we have the meeples that collect resources, but then, like David said, there's the other types of meeples that just allow you to do other things. Like there's green public servant meeples that let you reuse workers or stand workers back on their feet so you can get a bigger bonus from them. And you could build out a strategy that has a lot of those, which I think you had quite a few of those.
I had 2 green workers, and what they did specifically is they let you upgrade a worker. So if a worker's on its back at the end of your roll, you can flip him up to his side. If he's on his side, you could flip him up to his feet. And if it was a green worker on his feet, you could do 2 of those things. So you could take an exhausted worker all the way to their feet. So it gave you a very satisfying and useful way to mitigate the, not dice, but the meeples in this case. So if you're averse to the risk of rolling the rolling the meeples and getting what you can get these green guys and kind of like work within that a little bit. Now, that would lead me to, I think, what we both say is one of the things that make this game something that might not be for you.
Oh, if you don't like, first of all, I think if you don't like push your luck, because that push your luck element is a big part of the game. The game encourages you to push your luck. You get to that moment when you're looking at your thing and you're saying, oh, well, if I stop now, I'm only getting 2 meeples. Like, I really need to roll.
I want to roll a little bit
more.
It gets even worse later when you have 10 meeples that you roll and you're like, okay, well, I've gotten 5, but there's 4 meeples left. Surely I can toss these 4 meeples in the box and one of them will be on their feet, and then sometimes it's not. And I think that luck in and of itself isn't enough to turn people off, but Ryan mentioned this after we played. If one person's pushing their luck and things are going really well for them, and then you try to push your luck and it just continually goes bad, that might not be a great feeling. However, with that said, like I said, you can use those green meeples, and at the end of the day, you don't have to push your luck. You are always guaranteed to have more than half of your meeples that you can use. So as you build up your meeple pool, you're always, if you have a max of 10, you're guaranteed you're always going to have 5 or 6, actually.
And that's kind of what I did. But I think you just have to know who you are as a player. Like, there's certain games that are push your luck. If you're watching another player just constantly push their luck and get, I'm getting something, and you can just be excited for them and not begrudge it and not let that ruin your experience, then you're probably still going to enjoy this. You just have to know who you are. And I think the other thing, too, that might turn some people away, there is a lot of plastic on the table. There is a lot of fiddliness with this game. There is a lot of stacking cubes and a lot of double checking, like, how many cubes did I need in there? Like, how many of
this?
this?
Not too bad, though.
They did print the numbers on the side as well,
Yeah, they did print, like,
they
thought ahead. They have the numbers of these buildings that the buildings require underneath the buildings, but then they have reminders off to the side. And the flip side, I'm going to go back to who it's for, because I think it's the same thing. I think there's a lot of people who would really appreciate this table presence.
And I do. I think it looks great
when
once
you
it's
look
done.
at this game when it's done, it's a really, really cool thing.
For sure.
I think all the decisions they made, and we can't finish this video without mentioning Kwanchai Moria's artwork is beautiful. They did a few little things, little touches with the artwork and how it's all laid out, and I think really, really makes this thing come together.
I love it. You're not going to really maybe get to see the board empty, but it just reminds me of SimCity a lot. Like, you're taking these little plots of land, putting these buildings, things are just sprouting up. It's a really cool, it's just a really cool, fun game, and it is a memorable experience, even if you play it once, and it's, maybe it's forgettable for you, but you're going to remember the table presence that this game had for sure.
For sure. So that was our experience having just played Rolling Heights. If you have any questions at all about the game, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer what we can. Until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.